Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. In the aftermath of Mark Carney and the Liberals winning the 2025 Canadian federal election, separatist sentiments in Western Canada have risen significantly, and I would genuinely not want to be Alberta Premier Danielle Smith or Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe right now. Not because of any personal dislike, it's just because they are genuinely in a very tough position, and I want to break down what that situation looks like for you guys here today. Before I get into it, I just want to remind you guys, if you like my political coverage on this channel, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you're not yet a subscriber, and leave a comment, especially if you're from Western Canada. What do you think about separatism? Do you think that the positives outweigh the potential negatives? I'm going to be getting into those negatives today because I'm just going to be out upfront. I'm not really a separatist in any way. I'm not someone who dislikes separatists either. I am the most purely neutral person you can find on this issue possible. And that's not me riding a fence or anything like that. I just genuinely don't really care. A lot of my political time is invested into trying to leverage Alberta's power in Canada to try and improve the entire country. So every time people want to separate, it's kind of a bit of a, yeah, it would be maybe good for Alberta. At the same time, I'm like, thinking of all the people in Eastern Canada who kind of need Alberta to stick around to make the entire country a little bit more rational, even if they usually kick out of it and they demand that we have the Liberals for another term. But I just want to get into some of the numbers here that many people have been posting over the last few days. I thought Peter McCaffrey did a good job of framing it. He said, before the election, an Angus Reid poll suggested support for separatism would rise from 25%, which was what the number was at the time, to 30% if the Liberals were reelected. Now, a new Angus Reid poll shows it's actually up to 36%. And now, obviously, the numbers could be a little higher, could be a little lower. I have never been someone who thinks that polling is fake, but I also don't see it as being 100% accurate. Angus Reid in the federal election was a few points off of what the Conservatives would get and a few points off of what the Liberals would get. They tend to overpoll the Liberals a bit and underpoll the Conservatives a bit. So when take that into account whenever you look at numbers like this, maybe separatism is a little bit lower in places like Alberta, but people who are separatists are the most likely to actually answer this kind of poll question, even if they're not the majority. But we see here, and this is the problem in Alberta for Danielle Smith. Supposing Alberta does hold a referendum on succession, would you vote for your province to leave Canada or stay? And across Alberta, 52% say definitely would vote to stay. 8% say lean towards voting to stay. 19% say definitely would vote to leave, and 17% say lean towards voting to leave. Now, the problem for Danielle Smith here is that about half her base, actually more than half, what am I saying, would actually either consider or is definitely going to vote to leave Canada, where the NDP, 93% are definitely voting to stay and 4% are leaning towards voting to stay. So this is the problem that Danielle Smith has, and she's been trying to manage it as best she can. She can't come out against the separatists. At the same time, she can't endorse them. So she's in this between a rock and a hard place kind of situation where she can't come out and start spitting venom at them at the same time that she can't support what they're doing. She has to enable it more so. And frankly, this is kind of the right tact for her. A lot of people will pretend like, oh, she's just like an indecisive person or she doesn't care about Albertans or something like that because she doesn't support separatism. But what do you want her to do? Support a movement that frankly is probably not going to succeed and then destroy her own government, because then you're going to have a mass exodus of UCP support to the NDP because they're standing up for Canada. That would be a great way of making retired Albertans in Calgary go and vote for the NDP, because now they can ignore all of the terrible NDP social and fiscal policy and they can vote for them to stand for Canada. This is the problem. Remember, most people who live in Alberta, or maybe not most, but a large portion of them, did not originally live in Alberta at the start of their lives. They moved from Eastern Canada, they moved from British Columbia, and they might actually have a lot of sympathies towards Canada staying whole. And even then, a lot of people who were born in Alberta still have a very strong attraction to wanting to stay in Canada. So I don't really see the separatist movement having any ability to succeed. Maybe they can put it to a referendum vote. Even then, I could see that being a disaster for the UCP because, again, the NDP gets to run as the pro-Canada party against the anti-Canada UCP, even if they're not anti-Canada at all. But here is what Danielle Smith said at a press conference about a week and a half ago on April 29th.
To Alberta separating? That I feel that question wasn't directly answered.
Well, not by me. I believe in Alberta's sovereignty within a united Canada. However, there is a citizen-initiated referenda process that if citizens want to put a question on a ballot and get enough of their fellow citizens to sign that petition, then those questions will be put forward. Again, I don't want to prejudge what a question might be, but not by our government.
And this is what she's been saying repeatedly since then, is that she is not a supporter of separation. She's a supporter of Alberta having maximum sovereignty within a united Canada. But she will let the petition go forward because she kind of has to. Because if she doesn't let the petition go forward or she passes legislation to try and block it, well, now she's the big villain to all the separatists who will now mass exodus in a provincial campaign to vote for a separatist party. Or if she supports it outright, then everyone just goes and votes for the NDP. Even now, people may try and blame her and then say that she's not doing enough to quell divisions and then go vote NDP anyways. Voting NDP, by the way, would not actually make Canada more whole. It would just tick off the separatists even more, and we would just have divisions within Alberta. So we would have a divided Canada with a divided Alberta, which is the worst possible scenario. Separatist sentiment on the rise. At the same time, the NDP gets to take over the province and do what they want and probably get rid of citizen-led petitions. And here's what she said at an address to Albertans a couple of days ago, where she was also addressing her attitude towards the incoming Liberal government. She said she's had okay talks with Mark Carney, that they sounded at least promising. At the same time, she said that the words have to translate to actual action. My prediction is that Carney is not going to be particularly nice to Alberta, considering he's already baited and switched Danielle Smith at the beginning of the election, pretending he was going to get rid of a lot of the anti-energy bills, and then literally reversing himself the next day. So I think the good phone call she had with him recently is just representing another bait and switch. He's going to say the right things to her and then do the opposite.
To be clear from the outset, our government will not be putting a vote on separation from Canada on the referendum ballot. However, if there is a successful citizen-led referendum petition that is able to gather the requisite number of signatures requesting such a question to be put on a referendum, our government will respect the democratic process and include that question on the 2026 provincial referendum ballot as well.
And if you don't want the Alberta NDP to win the next provincial election, even if you're a separatist, I would say you don't want it to be on the 2026 ballot. It's not at the same time as the provincial election, but you are going to have the NDP use this issue to club the UCP to death. At the same time, I do not think that separatism is going to get across the finish line. So what I see this right now, and I'm not trying to be rude about it, it looks like what is basically a suicide mission. Here is Scott Moe basically taking the exact same position as Danielle Smith.
Mr. Speaker, there is this straw man argument really that is being put forward, Mr. Speaker, that it's either the status quo or separation. Well, the government of Saskatchewan is not interested in separation, and the government of Saskatchewan certainly isn't interested in the status quo either, Mr. Speaker. Here. Status quo where our province is being treated unfairly by a federal government for close to a decade now, supported every step of the way by the NDP, Mr. Speaker. And what we saw in this most recent federal election was 65% of Saskatchewan people didn't vote for that status quo either, Mr. Speaker. But it is not a straw man argument where it's status quo or separation. We don't like either of those. We think there is an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, and we truly believe and always have believed there is a right to the founding principles of this party, that there is an opportunity for Saskatchewan to continue to grow and prosper in its economy, to grow its population, grow our communities, reinvest back into those communities, all within a strong, united nation of Canada. Yeah.
So again, that is the tightrope Scott Moe is also walking, and now we have Carla Beck and the Saskatchewan NDP trying to put pressure on Scott Moe to double the signature requirements in order to get something on a referendum ballot. By the way, the referendum petition threshold is already very high in both Alberta and Saskatchewan. In order to get something on a referendum ballot in Alberta, I believe within 60 days, you need to collect 176,000 signatures, which is a very tall order, even if you already have email addresses, phone numbers, and addresses for everybody that you need to sign the petition. It's very difficult to actually find people within 60 days to sign something when you need 176,000 of them. And I believe in Saskatchewan, it's around the equivalent threshold based on the population of the province, but this is the game that the NDP is playing both in Saskatchewan and Alberta. If you're truly a patriotic Canadian, you will cram down on the separatists and force them to stop their petitions, or you will not respect the petitions. This is also what Naheed Nenshi is doing in Alberta. At the same time, he's whining about like anti-democratic things the Conservatives are doing by actually trying to make voting more transparent and trying to make the political spending more transparent. That's a different issue for another day. But then I also just want to move on to even David Eby currently is using this as a way of trying to buoy his own popularity from British Columbia. He's attacking Alberta and Saskatchewan, or basically saying the separatist movements out there are like unpatriotic, trying to make himself seem more patriotic as he gives out safe supply pills and doesn't crack down on rampant drug use all over his province. I always find it funny how you can be super patriotic and not even be taking care of your own backyard.
I understand. You've got a couple of Conservative premiers in Saskatchewan and Alberta. Their preferred candidate was not successful in the federal election. They have strong bases of support for the Conservatives in those provinces. They're navigating tricky waters, but I certainly encourage them all. Premier Smith, Premier Moe, and I believe that they're on board for this, to work together for the good of the country, to hold the country together, and to push back strongly on any kind of separatist sentiment. When a Conservative MLA here tweeted out a separatist image of Western Canada approvingly, and that we would become a protectorate of the United States, I didn't hesitate to point out how dumb that was. And I think he recognized how.
What a hero! What a hero he is. He pushed back on Conservative MLA D.L. Williams for putting out a post that really didn't represent everything he believes, but he was just basically putting out an image that was sort of highlighting the unfair treatment of a lot of Western Canada. And he called out that nonsense. Oh, good job, Eby. Are you going to crack down on crime? Lower taxes? Nah. No, he's not going to do it.
Dumb it was. He said he was texting while he was driving, which is also dumb. Take the moment to defend our country, take the moment to stand together, understanding that it can be more challenging in other jurisdictions, but this country needs to stick together right now. That's what I stand for.
And obviously, a premier is going to speak on this issue in a bit of a different tone than opposition leaders in Alberta and Saskatchewan. But what David Eby is doing there is trying to put a metal bar between the spokes of Scott Moe and Danielle Smith, basically saying that they can't just sit idly by and let the separatist movement fail on its own merits. They have to actually be standing up and opposing them strongly. Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith really shouldn't be doing that. Know what she should be doing? And it sounds strange. She should be lowering taxes, lowering regulations. She just needs to do a really good job governing domestically and saying, do you want this to continue, or do you want the separatist referendum question? Because if you want the good work we're doing domestically within the province, provincially, to end, you will put forward the referendum petition and give Naheed Nenshi and the NDP everything they've wanted to run on. Because the NDP cannot run on fiscal records. They cannot run on their own fiscal plans. They suck. They are bad on crime. They're bad on social issues. They're bad on education and healthcare. They put more money towards it, but the NDP have been very responsible for the administrative bloat within AHS. AHS is almost primarily run by people who are friendly to the NDP, and they've done a terrible job of it. Anyways, I'm not trying to blame the NDP for specific actors within AHS. I'm just saying that when they were in government between 2015 and 2019, everything got worse objectively, and now what's going to go on is that they're going to be able to run against a separatist petition, which Danielle Smith won't be able to do because a lot of her own people like the idea, even if it kind of is a pipe dream at this point. The separatist movement in Alberta is notorious for infighting. It's notorious for utopianism, people drawing up the exact way the new government's going to work when Alberta is the 51st state or it's an independent state or whatever. It's a protectorate of some random country. They love to talk about plans and then they never work hard enough to implement them. The whole thing fails. And then they try again in 3 years without actually refining their technique. So Smith has to somehow do a better job domestically in order to leverage that against the separatists who want to basically risk everything provincially, giving it over to the NDP for that 1% shot that separatism might work. Just many of the actors in separatist movement right now, I don't think are professional enough to get this done, frankly speaking. And I know some of them, and I actually very much like some of them, but they do not have the infrastructure or the machine to get this done. And again, I'm not saying things are great in Canada. Let's highlight some things that are definitely not so great in Canada. Have you guys seen this chart of unemployment around the country? Good job, by the way, for re-electing the PC party in Ontario, guys. You guys now have an unemployment rate of 7.8%. I know the Liberals or the NDP wouldn't be better, but that's why I was promoting the New Blue Party of Ontario, because the PCs, the NDP, and the Liberals would probably have about the exact same levels of performance when it comes to employment. Right now, the average unemployment in Canada is 6.9%. It's risen by 0.2 over the last quarter. This is absolutely abysmal. Honestly, you got to give credit to somewhere like PEI with a 6.6 rating. And I'm not going to give any credit to BC because that has nothing to do with David Eby. It's more so I think that they just have some, not trying to be hypocritical here, but, their massively high taxes means that pretty much that 6.2 is in spite of everything the government's doing. Saskatchewan, 4.3. Manitoba, 5.3. Not too bad. It's also a heavy amount of public employment that's going on in BC. They're driving down their employment. But it's not good in Canada. And guess how we could fix all of this? Reducing taxes. I don't want to be just sounding like I'm just beating a dead horse. If you lower taxes, this will all get better if you just lower taxes. So Canada is absolutely a basket case, but I don't think that you're going to be able to suddenly separate out or, in fact, build something that's, I guess, immune to corruption if you do so. If you separate Alberta or Saskatchewan, those provinces can still, as a sovereign country, can still elect NDP governments. They can start having Edmonton subjugate the rest of Alberta. Or they can start having Regina subjugate the rest of Saskatchewan. You can always be basically screwed over by somebody else. It's not like if you leave Canada, suddenly everything's great. You're going to be trapped in a province with other people who also don't have the same vision as you. So never assume that there's utopia is always over the next hill. It could get even worse and you don't even know it. So anyways, that's it for me today, guys. Hopefully you didn't mind my rambling towards the end there. But if you like my show, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment. What do you think about Western separation? What do you think Danielle Smith and Scott Moe should do? Let me know in the comments below. I definitely like reading them, and I'll see you guys all next time.